Hi guys, tonight we are going on a journey together through the deep, quiet corridors of time to witness the slow and wondrous transformation of our home. We are going to explore how the Earth began its life as a world of fire and shadow, only to eventually become the calm, blue sanctuary we know today. We will drift through the early atmosphere as it thickens with steam, watch the ancient rain fall for centuries on end, and see how volcanic outgassing and icy visitors from the stars slowly filled the basins of our world with the first vast oceans. It is a story of immense patience and cooling, a transformation that took millions of years, and tonight, you can simply rest as we watch the world turn from red to blue. Imagine yourself suspended in the velvet stillness of space, looking down upon the very beginning of everything. Below you, the infant Earth is a glowing orb of molten stone, a sphere of liquid fire spinning slowly against the infinite black. This is the Hadean Eon, a time of profound heat where the surface is a restless ocean of magma, pulsing with a deep, rhythmic glow like embers in a dying fire. There is no solid ground yet, only the slow, heavy movement of liquid rock, shifting and roiling under the weight of its own gravity. You are floating safely above it all, feeling the immense warmth radiating upward, but here in the silence of the cosmos, the chaos feels distant and strangely peaceful. The sky above this young world is not the blue we know, but a thick, hazy shroud of dark gases, trapping the heat and glowing with the reflection of the fires below. Within this heavy atmosphere, the first seeds of our oceans are already hidden, held in the form of invisible vapors and thick clouds of steam. As the planet begins its long, slow process of cooling, the surface starts to change in a way that feels almost like a dream. The molten orange of the magma begins to dim, turning into a deep, bruised purple and then a charcoal gray as the first thin skin of crust begins to solidify. It is like watching a lake freeze over in slow motion, but instead of ice, it is the very foundation of the continents taking shape. Enormous volcanic vents tear through this fragile crust, exhaling great plumes of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen into the thickening air. This outgassing is the planet breathing, a rhythmic release of pressure from deep within the mantle that builds the atmosphere piece by piece. You watch as these gases rise and gather, forming a dense, impenetrable blanket of clouds that wraps the world in a soft, gray embrace. In the distance, beyond the veil of the atmosphere, you see the silent streaks of icy comets and water-rich asteroids as they are drawn in by Earth's pull. They arrive like quiet messengers from the outer reaches of the solar system, plunging into the hazy air and vaporizing on impact, contributing their precious cargo of water to the growing reservoirs in the sky. The world is becoming a pressurized chamber of steam, a dark and humid realm where the heat of the interior struggles against the cold of space. The cooling is a process of incredible patience, a billion tiny moments where the temperature drops just enough for the magic of physics to take hold. You can almost feel the tension in the air as the steam begins to saturate, the atmosphere reaching a tipping point where it can no longer hold the weight of its own moisture. And then, in the absolute darkness of a world without a sun that can pierce the clouds, the first drop of liquid water begins to form high in the cooling heights. It is a single, tiny pearl of liquid, falling through the haze, vaporizing before it hits the hot ground, only to rise and try again. This cycle repeats for ages, a constant dialogue between the fire of the earth and the coolness of the air. Eventually, the surface becomes cool enough to hold the water. You hear the first hiss of rain hitting the darkening basalt, a sound that begins as a whisper and grows into a global symphony. This is the great cooling, a rain that does not last for an afternoon or a week, but for thousands upon thousands of years. The clouds release their burden in a relentless, gentle downpour, cooling the rocks and gathering in the low places of the jagged, volcanic landscape. You watch from your peaceful vantage point as the steam clears just enough to reveal the first pools of water, shimmering like mercury in the dim light of the cooling crust. These are not yet the deep blue oceans of our time, but shallow, mineral-rich basins, tasting of salt and iron, reflecting the lightning that dances silently across the horizon. The thunder is a low, rolling vibration that hums through the very air you breathe, a sign of the immense energy being traded between the sky and the earth. The water begins to flow, carving soft paths through the dark volcanic ash, creating the first rivers that wind their way toward the growing shadows of the deep basins. Everything is moving toward a state of equilibrium, a balance between the heat within and the cold without. The planet is no longer a world of just fire, it is becoming a world of mist and liquid, a place where the first stable surfaces are being cradled by the gathering weight of the sea. You see the ripples on the surface of these ancient ponds, driven by the thick winds of a heavy atmosphere, as the earth prepares itself for the next great phase of its long, slow awakening. The dark, jagged edges of the world are being softened by the touch of the water, a gentle smoothing of the landscape that has been waiting for this moment since the beginning of time itself. The light of the young sun, still faint and obscured, casts a pale, ethereal glow over the landscape, catching the glint of the expanding waters as they slowly, inevitably, begin to claim the lowlands. The crust is thick enough now to support the weight, and the basins are filling, inch by inch, century by century, as the planet continues to exhale its moisture and the clouds continue to weep their silver rain onto the cooling stone. You drift lower now, feeling the cool mist on your face, watching the birth of the first true sea as it stretches out toward a horizon that is no longer fire, but a deep and promising shadow. The story of the blue world is only just beginning to find its voice in the sound of the waves. The quiet rhythmic pulse of the falling rain continues to shape the world beneath you, a soft and constant presence that has redefined the very nature of the horizon. You are drifting through the heavy silver mist of a planet in transition, where the line between the sky and the land has blurred into a seamless tapestry of gray and shadow. Below, the infant oceans are no longer just scattered pools or fleeting mirrors in the dark, they have begun to find one another, reaching out across the cooling basalt plains like long, shimmering fingers of glass. The heat of the crust still lingers, sending thin veils of steam swirling upward to meet the downpour, creating a world that feels like a vast, breathing sauna, ancient and still. As you hover in this humid silence, you can see how the cooling process has entered a new, more stable rhythm. The chaotic fires of the Hadean Aeon have retreated deep underground, leaving behind a surface that is finally ready to hold the weight of a global sea. This is a time of incredible geological patience, where every drop of water contributes to a rising tide that will one day cover almost everything. The chemistry of these early waters is thick and complex, saturated with minerals leached from the volcanic rock and gases washed from the sky. They are not yet the clear, turquoise waters of a modern tropical reef, but a deep, metallic green or perhaps a somber iron red, reflecting a sky still heavy with carbon dioxide and sulfur. You watch as the water moves with a heavy, primordial grace, filling the deep impact basins left behind by the final echoes of the planet's violent birth. There is a profound sense of peace in this transformation, a feeling that the earth is finally settling into its own skin. The volcanoes, though still active, have become the architects of the ocean floors rather than the destroyers of the surface. Their slow, underwater eruptions create new land and release more vapor, a continuous cycle of creation that feeds the growing hydrosphere. You drift over a vast, shallow sea where the water is so still it perfectly reflects the thick blanket of clouds above, broken only by the occasional ripple of a distant volcanic tremor. The atmosphere itself is changing too, becoming more organized as the heaviest of the vapors condense and fall. The rain is no longer a localized event but a global phenomenon, a relentless gift from the heavens that has lasted for millennia. It is a slow, steady drumming that echoes across the dark rock, a sound that signifies the cooling of a world. You can almost feel the temperature dropping in the air around you, a gentle easing of the primordial fever that once gripped the earth. This cooling allows the water to remain in liquid form for longer periods, preventing it from instantly boiling away back into the sky. The stability of liquid water is the great turning point, the moment when the Earth begins to diverge from its sister planets, setting its own course toward becoming a sanctuary of life. The mineral-rich waters carry the building blocks of the future, a soup of elements swirling in the dark, waiting for the ages to pass. You see the first gentle waves beginning to lap against the dark, jagged shorelines of the first microcontinents, the water slowly grinding the stone into the very first grains of sand. This process is silent and slow, a testament to the power of water over stone when given the luxury of geological time. The world is becoming a place of soft edges and fluid boundaries. As you move across the darkening hemisphere, you notice how the light of the young sun, though weak, struggles to penetrate the overcast sky, casting a dim, ethereal glow that makes the water shimmer like liquid lead. There is no life here yet, no sound of birds or the rustle of leaves, only the eternal splash of the rain and the deep, low groan of the shifting crust. It is a lonely world, but it is no longer a hostile one. It is a world in a deep, meditative slumber, preparing itself for the wonders that are yet to come. The asteroid and comet impacts have slowed, though occasionally a stray wanderer from the outer solar system still finds its way through the haze, bringing with it a final delivery of ice to add to the growing volume of the seas. These impacts are no longer the world-ending events of the past, but gentle additions to the planet's water budget, their energy absorbed by the deepening oceans. The depth of the water is increasing, covering the lowlands and creating vast, interconnected systems that wrap around the globe. You are witnessing the birth of the world's circulation, the first stirrings of the currents that will one day drive the climate and the weather. The heat from the interior still warms the bottom of these seas, creating a temperature gradient that keeps the water in constant, slow motion. It is a silent, underwater dance of heat and cold, a fundamental rhythm that will persist for billions of years. The world is becoming more blue with every passing century, even if that blue is still hidden beneath a veil of gray clouds. The sheer scale of the water is starting to change the way the planet looks from space, turning a charred cinder into a glistening pearl. You feel a deep sense of calm as you watch the rain continue to fall, knowing that this process cannot be rushed, that it is the foundation upon which all history will be built. The primordial rain is a bridge between the fire of the beginning and the life of the future, a long, cooling bath for a world that has finally found its way. The jagged peaks of the early mountains are being worn down, their minerals washing into the basins to create the saltiness of the sea. Everything is connected in this slow, fluid transition. As the light fades into a deep, velvety night, the reflection of the volcanic glows on the horizon becomes more pronounced, painting streaks of orange across the dark, swelling water. The earth is a masterpiece in progress, a canvas of stone and steam being washed by the most patient of artists. You drift further into the mist, the sound of the water surrounding you, a lullaby for a cooling planet that is slowly, very slowly, turning into the blue home we will eventually recognize. The basins are nearly full, the crust is stabilizing, and the great rains are beginning to find their end, leaving behind a world that is damp, dark, and ready for the next slow step in its magnificent journey through the deep time of the cosmos. The great, heavy rains that defined the previous ages are finally beginning to whisper into a softer, more rhythmic pattern, leaving behind a world that is now defined by the vast, dark expanse of its first true oceans. You are drifting silently through an atmosphere that has grown clearer, though still thick with the sense of minerals and distant electricity. Below you, the globe is no longer a chaotic patchwork of fire and cooling stone, it has become a sanctuary of liquid, a world cradled in the deep, quiet embrace of water. The transition is profound and deeply peaceful, a slowing of the planet's early, frantic pulse. As you glide over the surface of the primordial sea, you notice that the color of the world is subtly shifting. The somber, metallic grays and deep reds of the early cooling are giving way to a soft, bruised purple and eventually a deep, emerald green. This is the color of a young ocean heavily laden with iron and minerals, a chemical soup that is slowly reaching a state of calm equilibrium. The intense volcanic outgassing has settled into a steady, rhythmic breathing, and the ocean basins have finally found their permanent shapes, anchored by a crust that has thickened and cooled into a reliable foundation. You find yourself descending beneath the surface, moving through the weightless silence of the deep. Here, the world is even more still, a realm of perpetual twilight where the only light comes from the faint, ethereal glow of the planet's internal heat. Far below, on the rugged floors of the newly formed seas, the first hydrothermal vents are beginning to take shape. They look like delicate, towering chimneys of stone, exhaling plumes of hot, mineral-rich water into the cold darkness. This is a place of incredible chemical focus, where the heat from the mantle meets the coolness of the ocean in a gentle, constant dance. You watch as swirls of minerals drift like slow-moving clouds through the water, creating a landscape that is both alien and strangely inviting. There is no sound here, only the soft, ambient hum of the Earth's energy and the slow circulation of the currents. Within these quiet plumes, something magnificent is happening on a scale so small it is almost invisible. The chemistry of the ocean is beginning to organize itself, moving from simple elements toward more complex arrangements. Carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen are swirling together in the warmth of the vents, forming the very first building blocks of what might one day become something more. It is a slow, patient process of trial and error, occurring over millions of years in the vast, dark laboratory of the sea. You drift along the floor of the ocean, witnessing the steady accumulation of organic molecules in the porous walls of the stone chimneys. The environment is becoming more stable, more predictable, and more balanced. The early Earth has moved past its violent adolescence and is now settling into a long, quiet period of maturation. The global temperatures have leveled out, and the thick blanket of clouds has thinned just enough to allow the first pale, golden rays of the sun to reach the surface of the water. On the surface, the tides have begun their eternal, rhythmic movement, driven by the close presence of the moon. The water rises and falls with a deep, soothing regularity, washing over the edges of the first stable land masses and carrying more minerals back into the deep. You witness the birth of a global circulation system, where the warm waters of the equator slowly trade places with the cooler waters of the poles, creating a planet-wide heartbeat. The world is no longer just a collection of parts, it is a single, interconnected system of water, air, and stone. As you float in the shallow reaches of a tranquil bay, you see the way the sunlight plays across the ripples, creating patterns of light that dance on the seafloor. The chemistry here is different from the deep vents, influenced by the energy of the sun and the presence of the atmosphere. It is a world of incredible potential, a quiet theater where the actors are still taking their places behind the curtain. The air you breathe is still low in oxygen, but it is rich and heavy, a protective layer that keeps the planet's warmth from escaping into the void. You feel the immense age of the world in every slow-moving current and every pulse of the deep earth. The transformation of the Earth into a blue planet is nearing its completion, but the story of what will happen within that blue is only just beginning to stir. The oceans are no longer just a byproduct of cooling, they have become the primary feature of the world, a vast, stabilizing force that regulates the temperature and provides a home for the unfolding chemistry of the future. The silence is not empty, it is a full and expectant silence, like the breath taken before a beautiful song begins. The primordial seas have become a cradle, a soft and enduring place where the harshness of space is kept at bay. You watch as a distant volcano sends a slow, lazy plume of ash into the sky, a reminder of the fire that still burns deep below, but here at the surface, the water is the master of all it surveys. The world is becoming quieter, more rhythmic, and more certain of its own existence. The first chapters of the Earth's long history have been written in stone and steam, and now, the story is being inscribed in the fluid, eternal memory of the water. You feel yourself drifting into a state of deep, effortless relaxation, mirroring the calm of the global ocean as it settles into its new, permanent home. In the silent, weightless depths of the primordial sea, the slow pulse of the planet's internal warmth continues to breathe life into the darkness. You are drifting through a world that has finally found its rhythm, a place where the violent collisions of the past have been replaced by a deep and enduring stillness. The water around you is warm and heavy with the taste of ancient minerals, a thick, liquid medium that cradles the very first secrets of a world beginning to wake up. Below, the sea floor is a landscape of soft, billowing mineral clouds and the gentle, constant glow of the hydrothermal vents. These towering structures, sculpted by the meeting of magma-heated water and the cold pressure of the deep, stand like silent sentinels in the gloom, exhaling plumes of life-giving chemistry. As you hover near these vents, you witness a transformation so subtle and so slow that it feels like the unfolding of a long, quiet dream. The chemistry of the ocean is no longer just a collection of random elements, it is beginning to organize itself into patterns of incredible, delicate complexity. Within the tiny, mineral-lined pockets of the vent chimneys, the building blocks of something more are gathering. Amino acids, the humble precursors of everything that will follow, are being forged in the heat and pressure, drifting through the seawater like microscopic stars. There is no hurry here, only the infinite patience of geological time. You watch as these molecules collide and bond, driven by the soft energy gradients of the vents, forming longer chains that hold the faint promise of memory. The ocean is acting as a vast, global laboratory, a sanctuary where the laws of physics and chemistry are slowly, meticulously weaving the first threads of biological history. You drift through a shimmering cloud of lipids, tiny droplets of oil and fat that have begun to self-assemble in the water, forming small, hollow spheres. These fragile membranes are the world's first enclosures, tiny spaces where the chemistry of the inside can be just a little bit different from the chemistry of the outside. It is a soft, quiet boundary, a way for the young Earth to protect its most delicate experiments from the vastness of the sea. Within these microscopic bubbles, the first whispers of a molecular world are taking shape. You are witnessing the slow emergence of the RNA world, where simple strands of information-carrying molecules begin to find a sense of order. There is no sudden flash of life, no dramatic awakening, only the gradual stabilization of these tiny, self-replicating patterns. It is a process that takes millions of years, a slow-motion dance of carbon and nitrogen under the watchful eye of the deep-sea fires. The earth above is still a lonely place of wind and water, but down here, in the warm, mineral-rich dark, the first sparks of complexity are being nurtured by the planet's own heat. You feel the immense weight of the water above you, a protective blanket that shields this fragile chemistry from the harsh radiation of the young sun. The tides above continue their rhythmic rise and fall, pulling the oceans across the face of the world, but down here, the environment remains steady and constant. It is the perfect cradle, a place of stability in a universe of chaos. You see the way the minerals precipitate from the vent plumes, falling like a slow, white snow onto the dark basalt of the ocean floor, burying the secrets of the past even as the future begins to stir. The world is becoming more than just a planet of water, it is becoming a planet of potential. Every movement in the water, every shift in the chemical currents, is a step toward a complexity that the universe has never seen before. You drift further into the gloom, feeling the comforting warmth of the currents as they carry you past another field of glowing chimneys. The sense of peace here is absolute, a meditative stillness that reflects the incredible patience required for life to even think about beginning. Nothing is rushed, nothing is forced. The transition from non-living matter to the first proto-life is a seamless, invisible gradient, like the fading of a sunset into the night. The molecules are learning to hold on to their shape, to repeat their patterns, to endure against the slow erosion of time. You watch as a particularly large plume of mineral-rich water surges upward, carrying with it a new generation of chemical building blocks to be tested in the silent, dark reaches of the sea. The foundations of the future are being laid in the most humble of places, among the rocks and the heat of the deep. The ocean is no longer just a vast body of water, it is a living, breathing entity, a liquid heart that beats with the slow, steady rhythm of the Earth's core. As you float in this eternal twilight, you realize that the world has found its purpose in the quiet, and as the molecules continue to gather and the membranes continue to form, the Earth prepares itself for a journey that will span billions of years, a journey that begins here, in the dark, with a single, silent bond between atoms that refuse to let go. The stability of the deep has become the anchor for all that is to come, a peaceful harbor where the first tiny vessels of life are being built, one slow, deliberate molecule at a time. The silent, dark embrace of the deep ocean continues to hold the world in a state of quiet anticipation, where the boundaries between chemistry and life are as soft and blurred as the edges of a dream. You are drifting through this ancient, liquid sanctuary, feeling the gentle push and pull of currents that have been moving in the same steady rhythm for millions of years. In the shadows of the hydrothermal vents, the microscopic dance of molecules has reached a new, more enduring stage of grace. The tiny spheres of lipid membranes, those fragile bubbles of protection you witnessed forming in the silence, are no longer just fleeting accidents of physics, they have begun to persist, lingering in the warm, mineral-rich plumes long enough to become something more than just a shell. Inside these quiet, protected spaces, the chemical reactions are finding a way to repeat themselves, creating a slow, steady heartbeat of molecular activity that mirrors the larger rhythms of the planet itself. It is as if the ocean is starting to remember, developing a soft, liquid memory that allows the patterns of the past to stay and settle into the present. You watch as strands of RNA, those delicate chains of information, begin to drift within these small enclosures, finding a stability that was impossible in the open sea. There is no haste in this process, no sudden spark of animation, only the infinite patience of a world that has all the time in the universe to get things right. The earth above remains a vast, unpopulated wilderness of water and stone, but down here, in the warm twilight of the vents, the first metabolic cycles are beginning to hum with a low, constant energy. These cycles are like the turning of a slow, invisible wheel, taking in the heat and the sulfur from the Earth's interior and transforming them into a steady flow of chemical potential. You can see the way the minerals glow faintly as they precipitate out of the water, coating the walls of the vent chimneys in a layer of complex stone that acts as both a catalyst and a cradle. The chemistry is becoming more organized, more self-sustaining, and more resilient. Each small enclosure is a tiny island of order in a vast sea of entropy, a place where the rules of life are being whispered before they are ever spoken aloud. You feel a sense of profound peace as you observe these persistent patterns, realizing that you are witnessing the very first threads of a story that will eventually cover the entire globe. The water around you is thick with these invisible experiments, a global soup of possibility that stretches from the deepest trenches to the sunlit shallows of the first coastal lagoons. The tides continue to wash over the dark volcanic rocks far above, pulling the mineral wealth of the land into the sea, feeding this great, slow-motion engine of creation. Nothing is certain yet, and the balance is still incredibly fragile. A shift in temperature or a change in the flow of a vent could dissolve these patterns back into the chaos of the atoms. But the frequency of these stable systems is increasing, spreading through the deep like a slow, warming thought. You drift through a cloud of organic mist, seeing how the light from the vents catches the shimmering edges of the membranes, creating a world that looks like a cathedral of liquid light and shadow. The transition from non-living matter to something that persists, something that replicates, is happening in 1,000 different ways across the vastness of the seafloor. It is a time of incredible stillness, where the only sound is the deep, muffled roar of the Earth's crust shifting and the soft hiss of the hot water meeting the cold. This is the threshold of existence, a place where the universe is learning how to hold on to itself. The molecular chains are growing longer, the membranes are becoming more complex, and the metabolic wheels are turning with a bit more certainty. You find yourself sinking into a deep, meditative state, lulled by the consistency of these ancient cycles and the knowledge that the planet is finally settling into its role as a nurturer. The blue world is no longer just a physical place of water and rock, it is becoming a vessel for something internal, a quiet complexity that is starting to take root in the very fabric of the sea. As you move further into the quiet gloom, you see how these early systems are beginning to colonize the mineral surfaces, creating a thin, microscopic film of organized chemistry that coats the stones like a gentle, living velvet. The memory of the ocean is deepening, and the patterns are becoming more widespread, preparing the way for the next great step in the long, slow awakening of the Earth. The darkness is no longer empty, it is full of a soft, persistent potential that glows with the promise of a future that is still millions of years away. You drift along with the warm current, feeling the weight of the water as a comforting blanket, watching as the first stable cycles of the world continue their silent, rhythmic work in the deep heart of the primordial blue. The foundations are set, the chemistry is constant, and the world is waiting in a state of perfect, peaceful readiness for the moment when the first true spark of biology will finally begin to glow in the dark. The soft velvet of the deep ocean continues to hold you in its weightless embrace, where the line between the physical world and the first stirrings of life remains as thin as a thread of silk. You are drifting slowly through the warm, mineral-heavy waters surrounding the ancient hydrothermal fields, where the rhythmic hiss of the vents provides a low, steady heartbeat for a world in transition. The self-organizing patterns you have been watching are no longer fleeting shadows of chemistry, they are beginning to take on a quiet, persistent strength, a quality of endurance that feels like a long, slow exhale of the earth itself. The tiny, membrane-bound spheres that gathered in the crevices of the stone chimneys are now finding ways to stay whole for longer periods, resisting the gentle pull of the currents and the slow erosion of the tides. Within these fragile enclosures, the molecular cycles are becoming more consistent, a beautiful and accidental choreography of atoms that has begun to repeat with a newfound reliability. This is the dawn of the autocatalytic reaction, a quiet moment where the chemistry of the deep begins to feed upon itself, creating the very components needed to keep the cycle turning. You watch as these clusters of organic molecules drift like slow, glowing dust through the plumes of the vents, catching the faint, orange light of the Earth's internal fires. There is no sense of urgency in this world, only the vast, unfolding patience of the eons as these systems learn the art of persistence. In this twilight realm, a subtle form of selection is taking place, not through struggle or competition, but through the simple, silent grace of stability. The patterns that are more robust, those that can better withstand the fluctuations of heat and salt, are the ones that remain to be seen again. You are witnessing the very first ancestors of memory, a physical record written in the structure of long-form molecules that find a way to replicate their own shapes. It is a slow and delicate process, a series of million-year whispers that gradually build into a steady conversation between the planet and the potential of biology. The deep ocean floor is a vast, quiet cathedral of stone and water, where the sediments fall like a continuous, fine snow, burying the old while the new continues to stir in the warmth. You feel the immense stillness of the planet, a world that is almost entirely blue and silver, where the land is still just a collection of dark volcanic islands rising out of a global sea. The energy gradients near the vents act as a gentle power source, a constant flow of electrons that keeps the early metabolic-like cycles moving in their slow, circular paths. Nothing here is fully alive in the way we understand it today, yet nothing is truly inert. It is a shimmering, intermediate state where the molecules are learning how to dance. You drift closer to a field of mineral chimneys, seeing the way the microscopic films of organized chemistry have begun to coat the jagged surfaces in a soft, iridescent layer. This is a world of quiet persistence, where the boundaries of what is possible are being tested one bond at a time. The ocean is acting as a giant cradle, shielding these fragile protocells from the vastness of space and the harshness of the atmosphere far above. In this deep, pressurized sanctuary, the systems are becoming more self-sustaining, less dependent on the random chance of a passing mineral and more capable of drawing what they need from the environment around them. You observe the way these clusters grow and then gently split apart, their new forms carrying the same structural echoes of the ones that came before. It is a slow-motion blossoming of complexity, happening in the dark, beneath miles of heavy water, where the pressure itself seems to hold the molecules together in a comforting hug. The Earth is a planet of immense, quiet waiting, and you are here to see the patience of the water as it nurtures these first, fragile hints of a biological future. The blue-green depths are no longer just a chemical soup, they are becoming a home, a place where the memory of order is being preserved against the great, cold silence of the universe. You find yourself sinking deeper into the calm of the scene, lulled by the consistency of the vents and the slow, rhythmic movement of the organic mists. The transformation is moving toward a threshold, a point where the persistence of these systems will eventually become a constant presence in the sea. As you drift away from the warmth of the vents into the cooler, darker stretches of the abyssal plains, you realize that the foundation for everything to come has been laid in the most subtle of ways. The patterns are holding, the cycles are turning, and the world is slowly preparing to cross the final, invisible line into the light of life. You feel the weight of the water as a soothing, protective force, a vast and ancient witness to the slow emergence of a world that is no longer just stone and steam, but a place of quiet, persistent, and beautiful possibility. The oceans are deep, the light is dim, and the story of the blue planet is settling into a long, peaceful night of becoming. The velvet darkness of the deep continues to cradle the world's quietest transition, a slow and sacred movement where the shimmering mists of chemistry finally crystallize into the first soft breath of biology. You are drifting through a world that has grown comfortable in its own stillness, a place where the rhythmic pulsing of the hydrothermal vents has become the steady heart of a new kind of existence. The fragile protocells and the long-lived molecular patterns you have been watching are no longer just guests of the current, they have become the residents of the deep. In the warm, mineral-rich crevices of the ocean floor, the first true cells are beginning to stabilize, their tiny membranes now strong enough to hold the light of a primitive metabolism against the immense pressure of the abyss. These are the earliest prokaryotes, simple and elegant single-celled beings that do not need the sun to survive, drawing their quiet strength instead from the chemicals exhaling from the Earth's glowing interior. You watch as they settle into the mineral films of the vent chimneys, creating a microscopic landscape of living color that clings to the jagged basalt in soft, translucent layers. There is no sudden flash of awareness, no dramatic shift in the atmosphere, only a gradual increase in the persistence of these tiny sparks. This is the transition into an anaerobic world, where life finds its first foothold in the absence of oxygen, thriving on the rich sulfur and iron that saturates the ancient brine. You drift through a slow-moving plume of warm water, seeing how the microscopic life is carried by the currents, spreading like a gentle, invisible dust from one vent field to another. The ocean is no longer an empty vessel, it is a global medium of connection, a vast and liquid bridge that allows the first ecosystems to take root in the shadows. On the floors of shallow coastal lagoons, where the water is warm and the movement of the tides is a constant, soothing massage, the first microbial mats are beginning to form. They appear as soft, velvety carpets of deep green and purple, spreading slowly over the volcanic sands and stones. These communities are the world's first neighborhoods, places where different kinds of simple cells live side by side, sharing the energy of the earth and the minerals of the sea in a long, slow-motion dance of cooperation. You feel the profound peace of this era, a time when the earth is both ancient and brand new, a blue pearl that has finally found its own internal purpose. The sky far above remains a heavy shroud of gray and gold, but here beneath the waves, the world is becoming vibrant in its own quiet way. You see the way the microbial films catch the dim light of the deep, glowing with a soft, ethereal luminescence that reflects the complex chemistry happening within their tiny boundaries. Nothing is hurried, a single generation of these cells may last for an age, and their reproduction is a slow and deliberate doubling of the life force, a quiet echoing of the self across the vast stretches of geological time. The planet is settling into a long period of biological stability, where the foundations of every future breath and every future movement are being laid in the silence of the primordial seas. You are witnessing the birth of a global metabolism, a system where the water, the rock, and the life are all woven together into a single, breathing tapestry. The hydrothermal vents continue their ancient song, providing the energy that sustains this microscopic revolution, while the cooling crust provides the stage. You feel yourself sinking further into the calm of the deep, lulled by the knowledge that the world is now, for the first time, truly alive. The oceans are deep and wide, and within their embrace, the first survivors are learning how to endure, how to adapt, and how to persist against the cold silence of the stars. The microbial mats ripple gently in the slow currents of the shallows, a silent testimony to the power of time and the resilience of the water. As you drift past a towering chimney of mineral stone, you notice how the life has begun to change the environment itself, depositing new minerals and shaping the very ground it grows upon. The story of the blue world has moved beyond the realm of mere physics and into the realm of the living, a transition that has taken billions of years to achieve and will take billions more to unfold. You find comfort in the scale of this journey, a reminder that the most significant changes happen in the quietest moments, through the steady accumulation of small, persistent acts of being. The earth is a cradle of green and blue, a sanctuary of liquid light where the first cells are finding their way through the dark, guided by the warmth of the home they have helped to create. You drift further into the peaceful gloom, the sound of the water a soft lullaby for a planet that has finally woken up, watching as the first stable ecosystems of the deep settle into their eternal rhythm, waiting for the long, slow turn of the ages to bring the next great chapter of the sea. The quiet, steady growth of these first microbial communities continues to spread across the seafloor like a slow-motion ripple on a vast and ancient lake. You are drifting above these expanding worlds, witnessing a time where the earth is no longer just a collection of minerals and water, but a living tapestry woven into the very crust of the planet. The deep, dark sanctuary of the hydrothermal vents remains a bustling center of activity, but life is no longer confined to the shadows of the Earth's internal fires. With the incredible patience of the eons, the simple cells have begun to travel, carried by the slow, heavy currents into new and varied environments, each one offering a different rhythm of existence. You watch as the microbial films begin to colonize the vast, silent plains of the deep ocean, where the water is cold and the pressure is a constant, steady weight. Here, the life moves even more slowly, adapting to the scarcity with a minimalist grace, breathing in the faint chemical traces left behind by the cooling of the world. In other regions, where the volcanic islands break the surface of the sea, the life has found its way into the sunlit shallows. In these warm, clear lagoons, you see the first signs of a different kind of energy. The microbes here are beginning to interact with the pale light of the young sun, developing the very first precursors to photosynthesis. It is not yet the robust, oxygen-producing system of the future, but a soft, sulfur-based harvesting of light that turns the shallow waters into shades of deep purple and dusty rose. These early pioneers are building something monumental in their own microscopic way. You drift over the first stromatolite-like structures, mounds of layered sediment trapped by sticky microbial mats that rise slowly from the seafloor like ancient, rounded monuments. Each layer represents an age of quiet persistence, a physical record of generations that lived and died in the same peaceful rhythm. These structures are the first reefs of the world, growing millimeter by millimeter over thousands of years, creating complex textures on a planet that was once only jagged stone. The diversification of these early ecosystems is happening with a profound lack of urgency, as if the Earth itself is savoring the process. Different metabolic strategies are emerging, some cells feeding on the iron-rich brine, others on the sulfurous gases, and still others beginning to recycle the waste of their neighbors. It is the birth of a global cycle, a simple and elegant balance where every movement of the water carries the potential for life. You feel the immense, silent expansion of this living network, a web that is slowly beginning to link the deepest trenches to the sun-drenched coasts. The chemistry of the oceans is being subtly reshaped by this presence, as the microbes draw elements from the water and deposit them into the sediments, slowly altering the balance of the world. The atmosphere far above remains thick and alien, but the sea is becoming a structured and organized realm, a place where the chaos of the beginning has been tamed by the persistence of the cell. You witness the way the light catches the silty clouds of the shallows, revealing a world that is no longer just blue and gray, but tinted with the subtle, living hues of a planet in bloom. The currents move with a gentle, predictable force, distributing the seeds of these early ecosystems to every corner of the globe. There is a deep, meditative calm in the realization that life has found a way to occupy nearly every niche the young oceans have to offer. The earth is a silent witness to its own transformation, a giant pearl in the darkness of space that is now shimmering with the internal light of a billion microscopic suns. You find yourself sinking into a state of effortless rest, lulled by the slow, rhythmic tides and the knowledge that the foundations of the future are being held in the soft, safe embrace of the sea. The expansion is peaceful, a gradual filling of the world's empty spaces with the hum of a metabolism that has learned to endure. As you drift past the darkening edge of a continental shelf, looking down into the deep blue mystery of the abyss, you realize that the story of life is no longer a series of isolated events, but a continuous, global flow. The oceans are full of a quiet, persistent energy, a potential that is slowly building toward a threshold that will change the face of the planet forever. But for now, in this long and beautiful night of the Archean Aeon, the world is content to simply be, a cradle of water and life turning slowly under the watch of a distant sun. The microbial mats continue to grow, the vents continue to hiss, and the great, blue heart of the world beats on with a steady, ancient calm that promises an infinite number of tomorrows. You feel the weight of the water as a comforting blanket, a vast and protective layer that keeps the world's first secrets safe in the dark, as the diversification of the living sea continues its long and wonderful journey through the deep time of the cosmos. The vast, interconnected web of microbial life continues to breathe its slow and silent influence into the very fabric of the sea, creating a world where the water is no longer just a passive vessel for stone and steam. You are drifting across these living oceans, feeling the immense, heavy piece of a planet that is beginning to change from the inside out. The expansion of the microbial mats has reached a global scale, and as you hover over the sun-drenched shallows of the ancient coastlines, you can see the first subtle signs of a transformation that will eventually reshape the entire sky. In these warm, shallow nurseries, the early photosynthetic pioneers are perfecting their quiet craft, drinking in the pale light of the young sun and releasing tiny, invisible treasures into the brine. For millions of years, these microbes have been laboring in the silence, and now, for the first time, the chemistry of the world is starting to respond to their presence. You watch as microscopic bubbles, smaller than a grain of dust, begin to form on the surface of the emerald-colored mats. These are the first whispers of free oxygen, a byproduct of a new way of living that is just beginning to take hold in localized pockets of the sea. There is no rush to this change, the oxygen does not yet escape into the air, but stays within the water, where it meets the vast reservoirs of dissolved iron that have filled the ocean since the beginning of time. You witness a slow-motion chemical ballet as the oxygen touches the iron, turning the clear, green water into a soft, rust-colored haze. This is the birth of the banded iron formations, a silent falling of oxidized minerals that settle onto the seafloor like a fine, reddish snow, creating layers of history that will remain for billions of years. The oceans are becoming a place of profound chemical cycling, where life is the architect of the environment. You feel the deep stability of this era, a time when the earth is learning how to balance its own internal energy with the external influence of the living. The stromatolites continue their slow, upward journey, building stony monuments that provide even more surface area for the growing microbial cities. These structures are now widespread, lining the edges of the first small continents like ancient, protective walls. As you drift further out into the deeper water, you notice that even here, far from the light of the sun, the influence of life is being felt. The waste products and minerals processed by the shallow water communities are being carried by the deep currents, feeding the specialized organisms that still huddle around the glowing hydrothermal vents. The planet is no longer a collection of isolated parts, but a single, breathing entity where every depth and every shoreline is linked by the movement of the sea. This is a time of incredible geological and biological patience, where the shifts in the atmosphere are still only a distant promise, hidden beneath the weight of the water. You see the way the light filters through the thickening clouds of microscopic life, creating a world of soft, diffused colors and long, peaceful shadows. The earth remains quiet, its surface still dominated by the restless movement of the tides and the occasional groan of a shifting tectonic plate, but the invisible engine of the biosphere is now running with a steady, reliable hum. You find yourself sinking into the deep calm of this ancient world, lulled by the knowledge that the smallest of beings are capable of the greatest of changes, provided they have the luxury of time. The ocean is now both a geological force and a biological sanctuary, a place where the memory of the Earth's fire is being softened by the persistence of the green and the blue. You observe the way the rust-colored sediments settle into the dark basalt cracks of the seafloor, a gentle smoothing of the world's rough edges. The oxygen continues to be produced in small, steady amounts, slowly neutralizing the ancient chemicals of the primordial sea and preparing the way for a future that is still vastly far away. You feel the immense age of the water, a substance that has carried the weight of the stars and the heat of the core, and is now carrying the seeds of a global transformation. The atmosphere above is still heavy and strange, but the first hints of a clearer sky are beginning to form in the far distance of the eons, a subtle thinning of the primordial haze that only the most patient of observers could detect. The world is settling into a long, productive slumber, a period of quiet maturation where the life and the water work together to build the foundations of the blue planet we will one day know. You drift with the slow, oxygen-free currents, feeling the protective embrace of the deep, watching as the first global-scale environmental effects of life begin to leave their mark on the ancient stone. The cradle is now a garden, a quiet and expansive realm where the rules of the universe are being translated into the language of the living. As the light of the sun fades once again behind the heavy clouds, the ocean continues to glow with the soft, internal energy of a billion microscopic suns, a silent promise of a world that is no longer just turning, but evolving, one slow, beautiful breath at a time. The endless horizon of the ancient sea remains your guide as you drift through a world where the boundary between the water and the air is becoming a place of profound, quiet consequence. You are floating in the stillness of a planet that is finally beginning to exhale a new kind of breath, a transformation that is as slow and invisible as the turning of a distant star. In the shallow, sun-drenched coastal waters, the microbial cities of the cyanobacteria continue their rhythmic work, harvesting the pale golden light of the young sun and releasing tiny, shimmering bubbles of oxygen into the brine. For so long, the ocean has absorbed these offerings, the iron-rich waters drinking the oxygen until they could hold no more, leaving behind the great rust-colored layers of stone on the seafloor. But now, as you witness the slow passage of millions of years, the balance is beginning to tip in a way that feels both fragile and inevitable. The localized pockets of oxygen in the water are becoming so saturated that the gas begins to rise, breaking the surface tension of the sea and entering the atmosphere for the first time in history. You drift beneath a sky that is still heavy and alien, a thick shroud of methane and carbon dioxide that has wrapped the world in a warm, hazy embrace since its birth. But here, near the surface of the living oceans, the air is subtly changing, one molecule at a time. This is not a sudden clearing of the clouds, but a slow and patient dialogue between the life below and the vastness above. The oxygen, once a stranger to the sky, begins to interact with the ancient gases, sparking silent chemical reactions that ripple through the atmosphere like a long, slow-motion wave. You can almost see the difference in the light as the thick, orange haze of the early Earth begins to show the faint, ghostly promise of a different color. The atmosphere is no longer a static, geological shell, it has become a participant in the story of life, a canvas upon which the microscopic masters of the sea are beginning to paint the future. As you move across the endless waters, you notice that the air feels different, not yet the crisp, clear sky of the modern world, but a realm in transition, a place where the chemical uniformity of the past is being broken by the persistence of the green. The transformation is so gradual that it would take 1,000 lifetimes to notice a single shift in the horizon, yet it is happening with a certainty that cannot be undone. The earth remains a quiet, oceanic sanctuary, but the very air is starting to carry the signature of the living. You feel the deep, meditative calm of this era, a time of planetary maturation where the oceans and the atmosphere are becoming a single, interconnected system of breath and light. The oxygen continues to accumulate, slowly neutralizing the methane and preparing the world for a cooling that will eventually bring about a new kind of balance. You watch as the sun sinks below the horizon, its light scattering through the changing gases to create a sunset of strange and beautiful hues, deep purples and somber grays that hint at the clearing to come. The world is settling into a long period of atmospheric preparation, a billion-year evening where the stage is being set for the next great act of the blue planet. You find yourself sinking into the peaceful rhythm of the tides, lulled by the knowledge that the smallest organisms are now shaping the very heavens. The ancient sky, once a barrier of thick and toxic gases, is being slowly, meticulously refined by the tireless work of the microbial mats below. There is a profound sense of security in this slowness, a feeling that the earth is taking all the time it needs to become the home it was meant to be. The ocean remains the dominant feature of the world, a vast and stabilizing force, but the air above it is no longer a silent witness, it is becoming a mirror of the life that stirs within the waves. You drift further into the cooling night, feeling the soft weight of the atmosphere as a protective blanket, watching as the first global-scale chemical shifts begin to leave their mark on the very air you breathe. The sky is still primitive, still heavy with the memories of the fire and the steam, but the first threads of a new atmosphere are being woven into the fabric of the clouds. The world is breathing, a slow and shallow breath that marks the beginning of a transformation that will eventually turn the entire planet into a jewel of vibrant blue. As you float in the darkness, the only sound is the gentle lapping of the oxygen-rich water against the volcanic stone, a lullaby for a world that is slowly, beautifully changing its mind about the color of its own sky. The foundations are moving, the gases are shifting, and the ancient earth is preparing to wake up to a different kind of morning, a morning that is still millions of years away, but whose light is already beginning to find its way through the thinning haze of the deep and distant past. The long, slow transition of the atmosphere continues to unfold like a silent prayer across the vastness of the deep, as the oxygen rising from the sunlit microbial mats begins to find its way into every corner of the world. You are drifting through a planet that is slowly, almost imperceptibly, changing its fundamental nature, moving away from its chaotic, methane-rich youth into a long period of chemical maturation. The air around you, once a thick and suffocating blanket of ancient volcanic gases, is becoming clearer and more transparent as the oxygen continues its patient work of neutralization. This is the great cooling of the spirit, a time of immense planetary reflection where the very air is being scrubbed of its primordial haze. You witness the way the oxygen interacts with the land, those small, dark volcanic islands that rise out of the global sea like the backs of sleeping giants. For eons, these rocks have been dark and unweathered, but now, as the new atmosphere touches them, they begin to show the first soft stains of oxidation. A gentle, rust-colored blush spreads across the exposed minerals, a slow chemical burning that turns the charcoal grays into deep ochres and warm siennas. This is the Earth's surface learning to breathe, a silent transformation of the stone itself that mirrors the changes happening in the water. Below you, The oceans are also entering a new state of being, as the oxygen-rich currents near the surface begin to push deeper into the abyss. The vast reservoirs of dissolved iron that once turned the seas into a metallic green soup are nearly exhausted, having been pulled down into the layered sediments of the seafloor. The water is becoming clearer, more crystalline, allowing the light of the young sun to reach even deeper into the cradle. You feel the profound stillness of this era, a time where the earth is no longer just surviving its own birth, but is actively shaping a new and more complex identity. The atmosphere is becoming more structured, with layers of temperature and pressure that create a more predictable and stable climate. The thick, orange glow of the past is fading into a soft, pale violet, a sky that is waiting for the final clarity of blue to arrive. You drift above the shifting ancient skies, feeling the lightness of the air as it loses the weight of the heavier, prehistoric gases. The transition is not a sudden event, but a slow and rhythmic layering of change that spans millions upon millions of years. Every breath the planet takes is a small step toward a different kind of balance, a world where the chemistry of the living and the chemistry of the stone are in constant, quiet conversation. You notice that some of the older, anaerobic environments are beginning to retreat, finding sanctuary in the deep, oxygen-free muds of the seafloor or within the dark crevices of the hydrothermal vents. This is not a tragedy, but a gentle reordering of the world's priorities, a making of space for the new complexities that are waiting in the wings of time. The Earth remains a peaceful, ocean-dominated sanctuary, but it is a sanctuary that is becoming more diverse with every passing eon. You feel a deep sense of security in this slowness, a realization that the planet is taking all the time it needs to ensure that the foundations of the future are secure. The Great Oxidation is a long and beautiful evening of the world, a period where the harshness of the early solar system is being softened by the persistent grace of the water and the life within it. As you float in the dimming light of a billion-year afternoon, you see how the reflections on the water have changed, the ripples now catching a light that feels more familiar, more welcoming. The air is thinner now, more ethereal, and the stars above seem a little bit brighter through the thinning veil of the atmosphere. The world is breathing differently now, a steady and calm inhalation that brings a sense of order to the vastness of the sea. You find yourself sinking into the deep, meditative rhythm of this changing planet, lulled by the knowledge that the great work of the oxygen is nearing its first major peak of stability. The oceans are clear, the rocks are stained with the colors of the future, and the sky is preparing itself for the final transformation into the blue we know. You drift further into the cooling night, the soft rustle of the wind across the water a soothing lullaby for a world that has finally found its way. The ancient fire has been tamed, the steam has been harnessed, and the earth is now a jewel of chemical balance, turning slowly in the dark, ready for the next slow step in its magnificent and eternal journey. The cradle is now a masterpiece of atmospheric and oceanic harmony, a place where every molecule has found its place and every current carries the promise of a world that is no longer just a dream, but a breathing, evolving reality. The stillness is absolute, the transformation is irreversible, and the blue planet is almost here, waiting in the soft, oxygen-rich shadows of the deep and distant past. The deep, quiet evolution of the atmosphere continues its slow and steady dance with the sea, as the world begins to settle into a new and more stable harmony that will endure for millions of years. You are drifting through a sky that has finally begun to lose the heavy, orange-tinted haze of its youth, replaced by a clarity that allows the light of the young sun to fall upon the waters with a newfound brilliance. The oxygen, once a rare and reactive stranger, has now become a permanent resident of the air and the upper layers of the ocean, creating a world that feels increasingly familiar, yet still remains ancient and profoundly still. As you hover over the vast, shimmering surface of the sea, you can feel the subtle shift in the very fabric of the planet's protection. High above the cooling clouds, the oxygen molecules have begun to gather and react, forming the very first, delicate layers of the ozone. This invisible shield is starting to weave itself into the atmosphere, softly filtering the harsh radiation from space and creating a safer, more gentle environment for the life that stirs below. It is a slow-motion tightening of the world's defenses, a quiet preparation for a future where life can move closer to the surface without fear. The oceans have become more structured now, with clear divisions between the oxygen-rich shallows and the deep, mysterious shadows where the ancient, anaerobic world still lingers in a peaceful retreat. You witness the way the currents carry this new chemical balance across the globe, distributing the life-giving gas to every coastline and lagoon. In these sunlit waters, the expansion of aerobic metabolism is beginning to hum with a quiet, efficient energy, as the earliest cells learn to harness the power of oxygen to fuel their slow-motion existence. This is not a time of frantic change, but a period of profound stabilization, where the planet is perfecting its own internal systems. The land remains quiet and rocky, but the minerals on the surface have fully embraced their new, oxidized state, casting a warm, earthy glow across the small volcanic continents that stand as silent sentinels in the blue. You feel a deep, meditative calm as you observe the planet settling into this long-term balance, a state of being where the air, the water, and the stone are finally in a stable, enduring conversation. The Earth is no longer a world of violent transitions, it has become a sanctuary of gradual refinement. You see the way the light catches the spray of a gentle wave, the water now so clear and pure that it reflects the changing colors of the sky with a mirror-like perfection. The world is becoming more suitable for complexity, a quiet theater where the stage is being meticulously set for the next great blossoming of the living. Nothing is hurried, for the eons are long and the patience of the water is infinite. You find yourself sinking deeper into the weightless peace of this era, lulled by the rhythmic rise and fall of the tides that now move through an ocean that is chemically balanced and thermally steady. The atmosphere has lost the jagged, reactive edges of the past and has become a soft, breathable veil that wraps the world in a comforting embrace. The retreat of the purely anaerobic ecosystems into the deep muds and the hidden cracks of the earth is a gentle movement, a reordering of the world's priorities that ensures every kind of life has its place. The earth is becoming a more structured and predictable home, a place where the seasons of geological time can unfold with a sense of order. You drift further across the endless blue, watching as the first faint hints of a more complex biological world begin to stir in the shadows of the coastal reefs, not yet fully formed, but present in the quiet persistence of the expanding colonies. The sky is a soft, pale blue now, a color that speaks of oxygen and light, a color that marks the true beginning of the world we recognize. You feel the profound security of a planet that has found its rhythm, a world that is no longer just turning in the dark, but is actively preparing itself for the wonders that are yet to come. The cradle of the ocean is full and stable, the air is clean and protective, and the ancient fire of the core is now a steady, distant heat that provides just enough energy to keep the global engine turning. As you float in this twilight of the eons, you realize that the transformation of the Earth into a blue planet is almost complete, not just in appearance, but in its very soul. The foundations are locked in place, the chemistry is certain, and the world is waiting in a state of perfect, peaceful readiness for the next slow step in its magnificent and eternal journey. You find comfort in the vastness of the time that remains, a long and beautiful night of maturation where the earth will continue to dream of the life it is destined to hold, while you drift silently through the calm, oxygen-rich shadows of a world that has finally, beautifully, found its balance. The soft, steady pulse of the oxygenated sea continues to wash over the world in a rhythmic lullaby, as the planet enters a long afternoon of biological experimentation that is as quiet as it is profound. You are drifting through waters that have attained a new level of crystalline clarity, where the sunlight reaches down into the shallow marine nurseries with a gentle, warming touch. The chemical foundations you have watched solidify over the eons are now supporting a new kind of architecture, a way for the living to gather and grow beyond the boundaries of a single cell. As you glide above the ancient seafloor, you witness the first, delicate emergence of multicellular life, appearing not as a sudden burst, but as a slow and graceful gathering of purpose. In the sunlit lagoons and along the edges of the submerged volcanic slopes, simple colonies of cells are beginning to find a way to live as one, creating the very first soft-bodied forms that sway in the slow-moving currents. These are the early pioneers of complexity, drifting like translucent shadows against the emerald green of the primordial reefs. You see the first strands of simple, hair-like algae anchored to the stone, waving back and forth in a mesmerizing, hypnotic dance that mirrors the movement of the tides. There is no haste in this world, only the infinite patience of a sea that has finally learned how to breathe. The abundance of oxygen has unlocked a new reservoir of energy, allowing these early organisms to grow larger and more intricate than anything that came before. You watch as small, quilted organisms, soft and flat like delicate leaves of flesh, spread themselves across the sandy bottoms, absorbing the nutrients of the water in a state of perpetual, meditative stillness. These are the first residents of a more layered ocean, a place where life is no longer just a microscopic film, but a visible presence that adds new textures to the underwater landscape. The ecological relationships forming here are subtle and peaceful, a quiet sharing of space and light that has not yet known the intensity of the future. You feel the deep, soothing calm of these ancient shallows, where the only sound is the muffled surge of the distant waves and the gentle bubbling of the oxygen-rich vents that still hiss softly in the deeper gloom. The earth is still a world of vast, lonely oceans, but it is becoming a world of quiet companionship, as different forms of life begin to occupy the same sunlit spaces. You notice the way the light filters through the bodies of these early creatures, revealing a delicate internal structure that is just starting to learn the art of organization. The transition is happening across vast stretches of time, with million-year pauses where nothing seems to change at all, yet the cumulative effect is a planet that is growing richer and more visually diverse with every passing age. The atmosphere above is stable and protective, holding the heat of the sun in a warm embrace that keeps the oceans at a constant, comfortable temperature. You drift through a cloud of drifting, plankton-like life, feeling the lightness of these early forms as they are carried by the global currents to new and distant shores. Every corner of the shallow sea is being touched by this new complexity, as life finds ways to adapt to the shifting sands and the varying minerals of the coast. The world feels safe and established, a masterpiece of biological and geological harmony that has taken billions of years to compose. You find yourself sinking into a state of profound relaxation, lulled by the consistency of the ocean's breath and the slow, rhythmic growth of the multicellular colonies. The earth is no longer an alien landscape of fire and gas, it is a garden of water and light, a place where the first secrets of form and function are being whispered in the silence of the deep. You watch as a soft-bodied creature gently detaches from the seafloor and drifts upward, caught in a rising current, a tiny speck of life in a vast and beautiful universe. The scale of the ocean is immense, but it is no longer empty, and the sense of isolation that once defined the Hadean and Archean eons has been replaced by a soft, living presence that fills the water with a quiet dignity. As the pale sun begins to set once more, casting long, golden ripples across the surface, you realize that the story of the blue planet has reached a point of no return. The complexity will continue to grow, the forms will continue to diversify, and the oceans will become the great theater of life's long and wondrous journey. But for now, in this peaceful moment of the Proterozoic, everything is simple and fragile, a beautiful beginning that is content to take its time. You drift further into the cooling night, the weight of the water a comforting and familiar blanket, watching as the first complex ecosystems of the world settle into their own enduring rhythm. The foundations are deep, the air is clear, and the blue world is thriving in the soft, oxygenated shadows of a history that is only just beginning to truly bloom. The soft, rhythmic swaying of the early algae continues to lull the world into a deeper state of biological harmony, as the oceans of our young planet begin to organize themselves into the very first complex patterns of connection. You are drifting through these expanding shallow seas, feeling the immense, cool weight of the water as it carries the whispers of a world that is no longer just surviving, but flourishing in a slow-motion symphony of form. The translucent, quilted organisms of the previous age are now sharing their sunlit sanctuaries with a new generation of explorers, as the first hints of purposeful movement begin to stir in the silt. Below you, the seafloor has become a tapestry of quiet activity, where the once still mats of life are being traversed by soft, bilateral forms that glide with a gentle, pulsing grace. This is the birth of mobility, a silent revolution where the living no longer wait for the currents to bring them sustenance, but slowly, patiently seek it out for themselves. You watch as these primitive, worm-like pioneers leave delicate tracks in the fine volcanic sediment, a visible record of a world that is starting to interact with its own environment in ways that were once unimaginable. In this deepening peace, the first structured ecosystems are beginning to take shape, like the slow assembly of a dream. You witness the earliest and most gentle of ecological relationships, where the energy captured from the sun and the minerals of the deep are passed from one form to another in a quiet, circular flow. There is an increasing layering to the ocean now, a vertical world where life occupies the sun-drenched surface, the drifting mid-waters, and the dark, sheltered crevices of the growing reefs. You feel the profound stability of this era, a time where the food chains are simple and soft, characterized by a slow and rhythmic absorption of energy rather than the sharp edges of the future. The first protective structures are appearing as well, subtle thickenings of the skin and the first microscopic traces of mineralized shells, as the organisms learn to shield themselves from the movement of the tides and the gentle interactions with their neighbors. It is a slow evolutionary experimentation, a billion-year dialogue between the need for protection and the desire for light. You drift through a cloud of microscopic larvae, the future of the sea, as they are carried by the oxygen-rich currents across vast distances, settling into new and varied habitats that are ready to receive them. The Earth remains a peaceful, ocean-centered realm, but it is a realm that is now pulsing with the collective heartbeat of a million different experiments in living. The atmosphere above has reached a state of beautiful clarity, allowing the moon and the stars to reflect with a crystalline sharpness on the surface of the global sea. You notice the way the light of the midday sun penetrates deeper than ever before, revealing a seafloor that is no longer just stone and sand, but a vibrant garden of soft-bodied creatures and waving fronds of green and purple. The mobility of these early forms adds a new dimension to the silence, a sense of direction and purpose that hums beneath the waves like a low-frequency song. Everything is connected in this emerging web of life, from the smallest cell to the largest quilted mat, creating a planetary balance that is both resilient and delicate. You find yourself sinking into a state of effortless rest, lulled by the knowledge that the oceans are now richly populated with the foundations of all that is to come. The world is becoming more recognizable, a place where the rules of ecology are being written in the soft tissues of these ancient ancestors. The sense of isolation has completely vanished, replaced by a deep and enduring companionship between the water and the life it cradles. You watch as a small, segmented creature pulses slowly through the water column, its body a marvel of early symmetry, reflecting the light of the world in its translucent skin. The transition is almost complete, as the planet moves toward a state of biological maturity that will one day see the oceans teeming with a diversity of life that staggers the imagination. But here, in the long and quiet afternoon of the Proterozoic, the beauty lies in the simplicity and the slow, unhurried pace of change. The world is taking its time, ensuring that every link in the chain is strong and every niche is filled with a presence that belongs. You feel the protective embrace of the sea as a constant and comforting reality, a vast blue sanctuary that has nurtured the spark of life from a single bond of atoms to this complex and beautiful array of forms. As the light begins to soften once more into a long, violet twilight, you realize that the earth has finally become the world it was destined to be, a masterpiece of water, air, and life turning slowly in the infinite dark. You drift further into the cooling shadows, the sound of the deep a soft and familiar lullaby for a planet that is finally ready for its ultimate transformation. The ecosystems are holding, the patterns are clear, and the blue world is almost entirely itself, waiting in the peaceful, rhythmic silence of a history that has finally found its voice. The slow and graceful movement of these early marine communities has finally reached a state of profound and enduring equilibrium, as the planet settles into its long-term identity as a sanctuary of blue and silver. You are drifting high above the endless horizon, where the deep indigo of the oceans meets the soft, clear violet of a stable atmosphere, witnessing the completion of a journey that has spanned billions of years. Below you, the world is no longer a place of chaotic beginnings or violent shifts, it is a masterpiece of balance, a living globe that breathes with a steady, rhythmic pulse. The oxygen that once struggled to find its place in the sky now wraps the earth in a protective, crystalline veil, allowing the light of the sun to shimmer across the waters with a gentle and constant warmth. The volcanic islands of the past have slowly gathered together, forming the first stable continents that rise like ancient, silent altars above the waves, their rocky shores being softened by the tireless, lapping touch of the sea. You feel the immense peace of this planetary stillness, a time where the fire of the interior and the cold of the void have found a perfect, liquid middle ground. The oceans are now deep, clear, and full of a quiet purpose, their chemistries perfectly aligned with the life that thrives within them. As you glide over the vast coastal stretches, you see how the simple ecosystems have matured, creating a world where every tide carries the potential for continuity and every current is a highway for the living. The early soft-bodied creatures, the waving algae, and the first mobile pioneers are no longer just experiments, they are the permanent residents of a world that has finally learned how to sustain itself. There is a deep, meditative security in this realization, a sense that the Earth has finally arrived at the destination it has been moving toward since the first steam condensed into the first drop of rain. You find yourself sinking into a state of absolute rest, lulled by the knowledge that the foundations of our world are now set in stone and water, secure against the vastness of the cosmos. The atmosphere is calm and reliable, its layers of ozone and oxygen acting as a soft, invisible shield that keeps the world's first secrets safe and warm. The transition from a world of fire to a world of water is complete, yet the transformation continues in the most subtle and beautiful of ways, through the slow accumulation of a billion quiet moments. The Earth is a jewel of balance, a planet that has found its rhythm in the deep time of the universe, turning slowly and silently under the watchful gaze of the stars. You watch as the moonlight catches the surface of the global sea, creating a path of shimmering silver that stretches from one horizon to the other, a silent testimony to the clarity and the purity of the new world. The ecosystems below are tucked into their own enduring rhythms, the life force of the planet humming with a low and steady energy that requires no effort, only existence. The sense of ancient isolation has been replaced by a profound and interconnected belonging, where the stone, the air, and the water are all part of a single, breathing organism. You feel the protective embrace of this blue world as a constant and comforting reality, a vast sanctuary that will continue to evolve and diversify through the eons to come. There is no need for haste, no need for urgency, for the earth has all the time in the infinite to watch its garden grow. The transformation into the blue planet we know was not a single event, but a long and beautiful evening of becoming, a story written in the cooling of the crust and the rising of the tides. You drift further into the velvety darkness of the planetary night, the sound of the ocean a soft and familiar whisper that tells you everything is exactly as it should be. The world is stable, the life is widespread, and the blue heart of the earth beats on with a quiet, ancient strength. You are a part of this stillness, a witness to the final settling of a planet into its own skin, feeling the weight of the water and the lightness of the air as a soothing lullaby for a soul at rest. The journey through the deep corridors of time has brought us to this place of perfect, peaceful readiness, where the story of the past and the promise of the future meet in the silence of the deep. The earth continues to turn, the oceans continue to swell, and the life continues to dream in the soft, oxygen-rich shadows of a world that is finally, beautifully, and eternally blue. You drift away into a deep and effortless sleep, carried by the slow, rhythmic breathing of a planet that has finally found its home in the stars, resting in the absolute calm of a history that has reached its most beautiful and enduring equilibrium.